Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. I've got some very interesting stuff for you today. Well, it depends what you think interesting is, because it's just reading, but the implications are very interesting. So this book is from 1721 by John Senex, and it contains some history of Tartary, which has been provided to us mainly by this dude that supposedly was the historian for Tamerlane. So I stumbled upon this book on the davidrumsey.com when I was looking through a collection of different Tartarian maps, and that's where I found the printout to this book. The first thing I found was mention in a Siberian section of the conquering of China in 1644, I believe, by Tartaria, or by Tartars from Siberia, which that drew me into this book. And then I found this section on Great Tartary. So I'm not going to read this bit here, because all it really does is talk about the areas. So you can read that yourself while I'm chatting on. But I will say that Little Tartary here, as you can see, is to distinguish it from Little Tartary. That was Lesser Tartary, so it was Little Tartary, and then it became Little Russia, and then it became Ukraine. So that's quite interesting, isn't it? That today Little Tartary is having all its historic buildings flattened. Well, not all of them, but having a good chunk. But anyway, we shall move on to this first bit of information, which I found rather interesting. So it says, historians and geographers did formerly give very fabulous representations of this country and of their grand Shan. Authors are divided about the origin and history of the Tartars. Some derive the name from the word Tartary, which in Syriac and Hebrew signifies a remnant, as if they were descended from the 10 tribes of Israel carried away by Salmanassar. Others from a river and country named Tartar, or Tatar, which Burgomaster Whitson takes to be the river Kwantung on the frontiers of China, where it falls into the river Amur. But the most probable signification of the name is invaders or robbers, and that they were at first composed of several nations who shook off the yoke of their tyrant, and joining together for common liberty were called Tartars by those whom they resisted or invaded. Their name came to be first known and formidable in Europe about 1168, when they subdued part of Muscovy and settled in the Taurica Chersonesus, now the Krim, so that's Crimea. They are said to have been oppressed by the king of Tenduk, whom they defeated and settled their leader Gengis-Khan upon the throne about 1202. Okay, so what I find interesting here is, are they already trying to smear the name of the Tartars, as they have done with the Mongol horde style of history? You have Tartaria or Tartary in Syriac and Hebrew, signifying remnant. So we know for a fact, well, not for a fact, but we know from history and the suggestions of history that the Jews moved from Egypt under Moses. They went around to Turkey, which was Assyria at the time, and then they moved. Some of them stayed, and some of them moved off in different directions, and then they continued around the Mediterranean to through Greece to Lemnos, and then some went to Italy, and others went to Wales, sailed from Lemnos in boats made by the Greeks, and sailed to Britain, where they settled in Wales. So we know that Ukraine, or Lesser Tartary, is bordering Turkey, which is Assyria, where they had battles on their way through Assyria. They had troubles with the Assyrian people trying to fight them. Is it not possible that a portion of the tribe cut off and went east into Ukraine and became the Tartars, which is remnant? I think that sounds very logical, especially considering the connections between the language, possibly. We'll talk about that later or another time. We'll just carry on with this. But their name came first to be known. We did that bit, didn't we? Right, where were we up to? 1202, wasn't it? These authors make the Great Tamerlane his 5th successor, and a prince of the blood royal. The best account we have of him is his history written by Mr. Sancton. Sancton? I don't care. Dedicated to Louis XIV and published by his authority at Paris in 1677. He wrote it from the memoirs of Albarracin, a famous Arabian who attended that prince in all of his expeditions and was his historian. So, note that Tamerlane is being described as a prince. So, even though he does seem to be in charge of the country, or of the empire, he's not actually. So he makes him son to Og, king of Zagatai, the ancient Parthia, says he was born Anno Christi 1335, and that his name signified celestial grace, whereas others derive it from Timur, which signifies iron because he was always in war, and Lenk, which signifies lame because he was born with a weakness in one leg. So there you go. As you can see, on one side they say I was called Tamerlane because it signifies celestial grace, and then on the other side they say nah, it just means iron lame leg. But he discovered a greatness of soul from his infancy, upon which his father had him instructed by the best masters of all faculties in those days, and he was particularly well versed in astronomy, astrology, and the Zoroastrian divinity. He exceeded all the youth of his time in military exercises, so that he was the delight of mankind. His father, growing old, resigned him the government, and appointed him 2 of his greatest and ablest lords to be his counsellors, till he came of age. Being at peace with his neighbours in the beginning of his reign, he applied himself to his studies and devotion, and by his mildness and affability gained the hearts of all his subjects, so that they regarded him as their common father. He was very religious, believed in one God, the creator of all things, gave everyone liberty who believed alike to worship him in their own way, but was a mortal enemy to idolatry. He very much favoured the Christians, so that according to this historian, he wanted nothing of a Christian but the name, and most of his great exploits were owing to the conduct of Axala, a Christian, originally a Genoese, and bred up with him from his youth. So, I think, even though he's from Persia, originally, he's a Parthian, I think it's quite evident that he was a Christian. You'll see later on he reads about Christ on his deathbed. Like say his top general was a Christian, and he favours Christians, as we'll see. So the Wikipedia thing that he was a Muslim might be wrong. Well, I think it might be very well be suggested that. And if you've seen a lot of Tartarian architecture, especially towards Russia and stuff, you will see an insane amount of Christian-inspired stuff. You know, archangels. Lots of Marys, that kind of thing. So it does make me wonder whether he really was part of the Christians, which again, if it was the 10 tribes of Israel they were descended from, these tribes of Israel would have probably known the story of Jesus and gone on to become the Christians, as we saw Christianity also begin in Wales and England independently of Rome. It wasn't brought over to there by Rome, it actually started there. So it's more than possible that Christianity started in multiple places all at once, because all the people shared the same beliefs. So the Jews that left Egypt might have considered themselves Christians, because the way that the timeline has been messed with, things that happened in the Old Testament might have actually happened after the New Testament, things like that. But it all depends on what you believe. So, anyway, where were we? We were up to here, weren't we? Tamerlane was very beautiful and majestic, and pretended to be descended from Samson, which made him more respected by his subjects and dreaded by his neighbours. His first war was with the Muscovites, who invaded Kasan and Astrakhan and pillaged his frontiers. He commanded his army in person, defeated them in a great battle, forced them to sue for peace and pay him tribute. This raised his character so much that the great Sham, his uncle by his father's side, gave him his daughter and heiress and appointed him successor. After this, by order of his uncle, and in conjunction with his troops, he prepared to invade the Emperor of China. So, before we move on to the next bit, I just want to point out, it seems he was in charge of either a country within the empire, or some form of government or something, because we've got the Grand Sham, who does seem to be a position of his own that seems to be even greater than his position. So, but he also appoints Tamerlane to be his successor. So it looks like he's really unifying an empire underneath him. But as we can see, so the Muscovites are the first to fall, and they pay tribute, so they become part of this Tartarian Empire. So he goes to invade China, during which expedition he fell sick, which gave an opportunity to, I know it says something about Tartar lords, let me just get up there, an opportunity to some great Tartar lords to form a plot against his succession on pretense that he was a Parthian and that it was below the dignity of the Tartars to be governed by a foreigner. Accordingly, they broke out into a rebellion under Calix, one of their chief nobles, which obliged Tamerlane to return. So he was sick and he was on this expedition to invade China, but he decided, I'm going to come home. So he fought the rebels, and after a great and bloody battle wherein he was dismounted and in danger of his life, he was seasonably rescued by his Christian general Axala, who routed the enemy and took their general, that was afterwards beheaded with 200 of the chief rebels, which put an end to the rebellion. After this victory, he marched against China, defeated and took their king, with 2 of his confederates, who, expecting to be put to death by the conqueror according to the barbarous custom of their own country, he generously restored them to their thrones on condition of becoming tributaries and paying the charges of the war. They gave him hostages of the royal blood for performing the treaty, and the river Kwantung was established as the border between the 2 empires. He transported the chief of the conquered Chinese into his own country and sent Parthians in their stead to keep the subdued provinces in obedience. After this victory, he returned with his queen, who attended him all the while, to his father-in-law, who met him at a good distance from his capital, and would have alighted from his horse to receive and embrace him as his sovereign. But Tamerlane would not admit of it, and on the contrary alighted from his own horse and paid all the homage and respect to the old sham that was due from a subject, which more and more endeared Tamerlane to the Tartars. So again, we're going to quickly summarise. After defeating the rebels, he went to China, defeated the Emperor of China, and instead of kill them as they expected, he gave him his empire back, but he said, you work for me now. And he put some of his own men inside to help keep the obedience, and he divided the borders on this river. He said, that's your area, this is my area, but you still work for us. So he now controlled China, and he went back to his uncle, who should have been, treating him like a god at this point for what he's done, but this guy was so humble that he would not have it, and he did an Aragorn, you bow to no one, and got down. So everyone loves this guy. His next expedition was against Bahizir, the Sultan of the Turks, at the desire of the Greek Emperor Palaeologus, whom Bahizir had besieged in Constantinople. Axala, who was related to that emperor, commanded in chief under Tamerlane, and Bahizir, hearing of his march, raised the siege, encountered Tamerlane in a plain near the Euxine Sea, but was defeated and taken prisoner by Axala, though the victory was chiefly owing to Tamerlane's own conduct and courage, who had a horse killed under him and was wounded with a lance. Now, this is where we're going to start to see, I'm going to put my mouse there so I remember where we are. This is where we're going to start to see the inconsistencies really mount up. Now, this battle is in history by Bahizir, but he's called Bayezid, I think, in Wikipedia's land, and he was, the Sultan of the Turks. But this battle is called the Battle of Ankara, and it supposedly took place in 1402. Now, if you've been keeping up with this, then I don't know if it's said it already, but I might have brought up that Tamerlane died in 1405, supposedly, at the age of, this says 66, but that doesn't really make sense with his Anno Christi, that would have been 70, but we can say that it's definitely between 66 and 70 years of age that he died in 1405. Now, Wikipedia says he died in 1405, and this book at the end says he died in 1405. So this battle supposedly took place in 1402. At the very youngest, Tamerlane would have been like 62 years old or something, or 63 years old, I think, at the very youngest, which it doesn't make sense. A 63-year-old in those days is not going to be fighting his own battles. It's just nonsense. You'll also see Greek Emperor Palaeologus. Now, if you take a look at the Byzantine Empire, which is what this is supposed to be, the Eastern Roman Holy Empire, then you'll notice that all of them are called Palaeologus. It'll be Manuel II Palaeologus, John V Palaeologus, and I think they've done that so that if you find anything that says Palaeologus, they've got their asses covered already. because this says Greek Emperor Paleologus. Specifically, Greek Emperor Paleologus. Now, it might be trying to say that this emperor is just Greek, but as we'll find out later, it talks of a Greek empire. So this doesn't make sense, because this should be a Byzantine empire. The Greeks supposedly haven't had an empire for over 1,000 years at this point, so it's very, very strange to call it the Greek Empire. But anyway, our author says that in this great victory, the Turks had 60,000 men killed and Tamerlane 20,000. One of his prisoners was the despot of Servia, who, being a Christian, Tamerlane treated him civilly, yet reproached him for taking arms against the Christians. But being persuaded that he did it not out of affection to Bahizir, but to save his own dominions, he gave him his liberty. Tamerlane ordered Bahizir's 2 sons to be treated with prisoners of quality, and sent them at length to the Emperor of Constantinople for their education. And after solemn thanks to God for putting so great an enemy of himself and all mankind into his hands, he ordered Bahizir, who raved like a man in despair, wished for death, and answered him haughtily, to be shut up in an iron cage, and made use of it as a footstool on solemn occasions when he mounted his horse. Now again, this changes. In the early historians, the early accounts, of this, there's not mention of the humiliation. The humiliation comes in later, and it's almost like they're trying to make Tamerlane appear more brutish and, than what it appears he is. He's sent the 2 sons of Bahizir to be educated in Constantinople, but he supposedly shuts him up in a cage and uses him as a footstool when he mounts his horse. And again, this guy's supposed to be 63. He's not mounting horses, and he's just been injured with a lance, as we saw up here. So it really doesn't make any sense. According to the original sources, he just kept Bahizir as a prisoner, and he actually liked him, and he was very sad when Bahizir died, which is because he was very fond of him. It was very weird, isn't it? If you lock him up in an iron cage and all he does is scream and wish for despair and death all the time and laugh at you hoftily and all shit, then why are you upset that he's died? But anyway. Upon this victory, all of the Asiatic provinces formerly conquered by the Turks submitted to Tamerlane, and he was congratulated by a solemn embassy of nobles from the Greek emperor, who submitted himself and his empire as homagers for having so seasonably rescued him from Bahizir's fury. But Tamerlane restored him generously to the full possession of his empire, which was such unexpected tidings of joy to the emperor that he went in person to Bursa to thank him, and Tamerlane returned with him incognito to Constantinople, where the emperor made him magnificent presents and swore a perpetual alliance with him. So this Greek emperor has said, well done, here's my empire, you earned it. And he's gone, no, that's not my empire, that's your empire. And he's gone, really? And he's gone, really? And that's how that's happened. He's gone, we'll be best friends forever. So unfortunately they weren't, because and this Greek emperor died. But again, it doesn't make sense, because if you look at the Byzantium emperors of the time, the only emperor that would fit with the 1402, I think, is Manuel II Paleologus, and he ruled until 1425 of the Byzantine Empire. So it doesn't really make sense with what this is saying. But after this, Tamerlane made war upon the Sultan of Egypt for resisting Bahizir, and being joined by 10,000 of the Greek emperor's best horses, conquered Syria, India, Egypt, and the greatest part of Africa, and in his return visited Jerusalem, paid his devotions at our Saviour's sculpture, and subdued Persia. I love that. He just turned up to Jerusalem, paid some homage to Jesus, and then just subdued Persia as he walked past. Just shut up. Little slap on the wrist. But yeah, this dude is clearly to visit Jerusalem, you'd think Jewish or Christian. So he returned with great triumph to his own country, and then to Tartary, where he had quiet possession of the empire after his uncle's death, and was joyfully received by his empress, who had bore him a son during his absence. I'd watch that if I was you, mate. As he was on an expedition to subdue the Empire of Greece, the new emperor of which had made a league with the Turks, so there you go, the new emperor, there was not a switch of emperor between 1402 and 1405 when Tamerlane died. So bearing in mind the Battle of Ankara, the one where this Constantinople was saved. That was in 1402, according to Wikipedia. And then all this, the conquering of Africa and everything, takes place within 3 years, and the dude's 66, 67, 68, and then, yeah, none of it makes sense. But anyway, he was taken sick, which obliged him to return to his capital, where on his deathbed he received... Let's just get up here to the top. He received the news of Axala's victories, sent for the prince's son, gave him excellent advice, recommended him to Axala's care, and soon after died, resigning his soul with great submission into the hands of God, to whom he ascribed all his victories. He took particular delight in reading the history of our Saviour, which is Jesus, and his miracles. He died in the 66th year of his age, AC 1405. Mr. Sanction says he far surpassed Caesar and Alexander, and had all their great virtues and none of their vices, and extended his conquers further than either of them. The great Maurice of Naflau, Prince of Orange, always carried his history in his pocket, and preferred it to the Caesar's commentaries and Xenophon's Cyropaedia, as a more proper model for great generals and princes. So, yeah, and then Alberson says he was subdued by Centrachio, his eldest son, but Letrachio, the younger, rebelled and carried the sovereignty, which ruined the grandeur of the family and the greatest empire then on earth. We have little certainty about his other successors, but Alan, one of them, is said to have turned Christian. So this says turned Christian, but some derive the great Mogul from a third son of Tamerlane, but of that in its place. Upon the whole, what is said by ancient historians of the great Shams of Tartary must either be referred to Tamerlane and his predecessors, or with some qualifications to the Shams of Zagatani and Tanguth, for there have been no such prince as the great Sham of Tartary, properly speaking, in Asia for many years. So there you go. That is very interesting, isn't it? And like I say, I'm going to get together all the inconsistencies for you so that I can actually say where things don't make sense and show you all the different dates. But like I say, already in this it doesn't make sense because it says he was born in Anno 1335 or I335, and it says that he died in 1405 in his 66th year, but that's 70 years. So, like I say, there's obvious errors. Wikipedia having these battles taking place, Battle of Ankara in 1402. It would have made everyone too old. Bayezid would have died, I think, a year later in captivity, when he was said to be a prisoner for quite a while. The Greek Empire as well. Note, it not only says Greek Emperor, but down here it does say subdue the Empire of Greece. So the Byzantine Empire, in 1721 at least, was being referred to as the Greek Empire. This dude hasn't changed it and said, just to point out he means the Byzantine Empire or anything. He says the Greek Empire, which makes sense, because what do we see in the Ulburum wreck off the coast of Turkey? It's a Phoenician ship which is full of Michigan copper, which would mean that they, as you can probably guess, had to go to Michigan to get that copper. And that was off the coast of Turkey. So if that boat was getting Michigan copper and they had to date it to 1500 BC, again, I think that dating will be wrong. It'll be much more recent, but it's probably because there was some form of Greek empire that extended out into the Americas. And as well, you'll see this with the naming of things like Greco-Romano. So that would mean the Greek and Roman inspired buildings. Well, if you take the Romano and make it an E, Rimano, then you basically got Greek remaining. So it's the remnants of the Greeks. But anyway, I'm going to have to go because I can hear my cat scratching at the door. She wants some food. So I hope you enjoyed that. And I will do that overview as soon as possible if you'd like to see the differences and see where all the errors were. Or you can do it yourself and tell me where the mistakes are. That'd be fun. But anyway, thank you for being here, and I hope you have a great new year.